to Practice on Purpose, where physicians can explore how to set up their career on purpose from the very beginning to stay connected to their purpose for their entire career. I'm Dr. Nicole Eull, a health psychologist with decades of experience in healthcare, from the front lines of a level 1 trauma center to the leadership of one of the largest healthcare systems in the country. I am passionate about physician well-being and creating mentally healthy workplaces. If you want to thoughtfully establish a career that aligns with your values and passions and ensure a long and rewarding life as a physician, then you've come to the right place. Today, we're talking workplace wellness and leadership in physician wellness. Our guest today is Dr. Gaurava Agarwal, and Dr. Agarwal is an associate professor in both the departments of medical education and psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. He serves as the Chief Wellness Executive Officer for Northwestern Medicine and is also the Director of Faculty Wellness for Northwestern University. Welcome, Dr. G.
Thanks for having me, Nicole.
We're so excited to have you here. I'm really excited to hear about your work and how you got there. You want to give a basic introduction of yourself to start?
Sure. Again, Gaurava Agarwal, everyone just calls me G. I am an occupational and organizational psychiatrist and also a well-being and leadership coach. And I've had the great privilege of serving as the Chief Wellness Executive here at Northwestern Medicine for several years now, and also very passionate about workplace well-being. I'm sure we'll get into it down the road, but a lot of personal experiences, a lot of experiences with colleagues that have sort of driven my passion for this work, and I'm excited to hopefully share some of those learnings with you all.
Great. So you mentioned that you're a psychiatrist. So how did you choose that specialty? And could you give us an idea of what your first few years of your profession were like?
Sure. I actually went to medical school to be an oncologist. That's what I thought I was going to do. That's why I chose the med school I did, so that I could work down at MD Anderson during med school, and then one day end up hopefully with a career there. And went through medical school. Really liked medicine a lot. But also was sort of having a good time on my psychiatry rotation. And, after sort of some burnout, the first couple of years in med school, I was like, man, this is really not exactly what I thought it was going to be. And as I sort of went through that process, it was the first time I felt like I wasn't looking at the clock on my clerkships. And, it didn't really matter what time I got home. I thought every day was fun. And but I sort of was still thinking, I'm here to do oncology. And so it took a while, actually. I don't think I made up my mind till certainly fourth year after doing a sub-I and sort of playing out my life to say, okay, this is fun. I actually like both of these things right now, but 10 years from now, what's still going to be interesting to me? Mm-hmm. I have a thing where I get bored pretty easily. And so for me the issue was, what's still going to be interesting 10 years from now? And I always felt like when I saw a patient in psychiatry, they don't know two stories of a human were ever alike to me. And that's what I thought would still be quite interesting to me. And also just the idea of psychiatry is you're learning about human behavior. And if you understand human behavior, there's no doors that are closed. You can do anything with that knowledge. And I found that appealing because I didn't really want to think of my medical degree as a terminal degree. This is the last thing you can do with it. I sort of had been around some leaders at my medical school at that time who had taken that psychiatry degree and done lots of cool, interesting things afterwards, besides just practicing clinically. And so I think all of those things led to going down this road.
I think that's so important to just pause and point that out, that it's okay to change your mind. That I think, especially when you're on a path that requires a lot of drive, dedication, perseverance, it can be very easy to talk yourself into, you just have to keep going. You committed to this and you have to finish it, rather than taking that thoughtful pause to say, listen, where am I truly happy and where am I feeling joy? And that's one of the reasons we started this podcast, was to help people early in their career take that breath and think about what makes me happy and what will I be excited about 10, 20, 30 years from now. I think
and you sort of do a deep dive too, where what I realized was that the part of oncology I liked was the psychology of cancer. Is that when you get that cancer diagnosis, you hear that C word, people change. And I like seeing, what I realized was I like seeing that change and that sort of moment that people have where they have to sort of reflect on, well, what do I want to do now? How does this change what my priorities are? And so the psychology of oncology was what I was really drawn to. And you sort of have that, to your point, deep reflection. You can sort of go down a path and not realize, hey, what is it that about this that I really like? Sometimes it can be you have a great attending or a great resident on the clerkship, and that can sort of color your thing, which is great on the one hand. On the other hand, that person's not going to be there for the 20, 30, 40 years of your career. So you better like something about the actual career, not just sort of the social things going on in a 1 month, 2 month clerkship.
Yeah, it's interesting how we sort of have an overlapping field because I have a doctorate in psychology, and my husband will say that people sometimes are fascinated by the fact that people tell us their secrets, that we know things other people don't get to hear, and that people let us in a way that natural, typical human contact isn't really supportive of. So we get to hear stories and maybe a depth of people's experience that they wouldn't normally share with other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a huge privilege.
So you've worked also many years in academics, and you've been awarded, I'm going to brag about you for a minute, you've been awarded multiple prestigious teaching awards. So how did you start teaching?
Yeah, I mean, so I probably haven't been totally honest. Before oncologist, I actually was sort of rebelling against my parents, who'd always said, hey, you should be a doctor. And so the one thing I knew I didn't want to be was a doctor. And so I thought I was going to be a teacher. So teaching has always been it's probably the thing I'm most passionate about. My parents came to this country from India and didn't really, know the game, weren't sort of educated in a certain way of how to navigate getting into college and all these sorts of things. And even from the very beginning, as early as kindergarten, teachers took a special interest in me and helped us learn English and spend extra time with us. Saw that, my sister and I were motivated and interested and were hardworking. And so they said, all right, if you guys want to see what your potential is, we'll join you on that journey and try to help you with that, help you realize that potential. And so I've always felt like they can make such a major difference in people's lives that can last forever. And that sort of immortality thing sort of is appealing for me. Watching my residents then teach their med students what I taught them is just a lot of fun for me. And so that was part of what I actually wanted to do. And that's why I've always been in academics. My first job out of residency was the associate clerkship director in psychiatry. And that had me basically be exposed to every medical student that went through Northwestern for, about 7 years. And so really getting a chance to teach so many students and hopefully making an impact on helping them respect psychiatry. Obviously, we know not everyone's going into psychiatry, but what I also know is that there's not a specialty that you can go into and not interact with our patients. And so if I could take that 1 month I had with you and hopefully leave you with understanding and destigmatizing mental illness, hopefully being able to care for your patients in whatever specialty you end up being in a sort of psychologically friendly way, then I thought I could make a huge difference. And so that was really meaningful work for me.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you say that, because it is true that many specialties require rotation through psychiatry. So you really have a unique chance to interact with quite a few different disciplines, which probably keeps things interesting. And I also love how you said that you leave a legacy, that there's this sort of immortality in being able to teach. That's really kind of poetic to think about, that when we teach, we leave a part of ourselves that will continue on, especially if we're a good teacher and if we've made a difference in someone's life. So that's very intriguing. Do you have a particular teaching style?
Yeah, so what's changed, I think, in medical education is the amount of time you get per student is so short these days. It may be a single day, it may be a week. And so I always felt like, because of what I said to you earlier, in that I know you're not going to do psychiatry. Yes, I have to teach you the side effects of this medication for your boards, but you're not going to remember that. So my sense was, in this limited time that I had with you, what would hopefully be something that could last. And to me, professional development, identity formation of becoming a physician, particularly when I'm working with med students and residents, was what I sort of cared a lot about. And my tactic, my special talent is interviewing, right? That's what psychiatrists can do. I always felt like no matter what you did, for the most part, there's a couple of specialties that probably don't talk to people that much, but you could be better at your job if you could interview well and you could build rapport well. And so I tried to pick those things that had broad applicability. And then I sort of like using shock value a lot. I was an inpatient psychiatrist, so it's already sort of a different place for a lot of people. And I always felt like I had to get your attention, and so that I would be memorable for you. And so I try to use things that are sort of a little bit shocking to sort of shake people out of the game that sort of med school can become sometimes.
Sure. It's interesting that I think there's two aspects to this. That what you're saying is, first, as a psychiatrist, you're never going to be out of work. There's always a waiting list to see psychiatrists. So you can't do all the work that needs to be done, especially post-COVID. I feel like more and more mental health has become, I don't know if it's actually more in distress, if people are more in distress, or they feel more empowered to seek help now because it was just sort of normalized during COVID. But you'll never be able to cover all the people and treat all the people that need treatment. So it's so important what you're passing on to other people. And I think they say that, over 50% of mental health is treated in primary care. And I was a faculty member in family medicine program, and it certainly saw, great interviews and great diagnostics and great triage and great prescription decisions. And then I also saw some not so great decisions where you're like, the person has insomnia, and then the next thing you know, they're doing a Siggy caps and they're prescribing the person an antidepressant. And I'm like, whoa, I think that was a little fast. Maybe we should slow down a little bit. So I think that great training and being better at interviewing and keeping a little bit of a wider scope at the beginning of your treatment is super important. So you've had two leadership positions you do now hold two leadership positions in two slightly different organizations. Can you tell us about that work and your path working in the well-being arena?
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully what your listeners will take away from this is you can have a lot of plans, but sometimes you just got to go with the flow, and you don't know how one thing will lead to another. And so, as a psychiatrist, my practice is taking care of impaired professionals that are in what's called safety sensitive positions, which means that in the process of doing their jobs, if they don't do their jobs well, other people's lives might be at risk. Think pilots. Think police officers, firefighters, physicians, nurses, pharmacists. That's who I take care of clinically. And so I started seeing these folks from around the country and started reverse engineering their stories when they would come to me, because they can't practice. They've worked so hard, obviously, to get this career. Now it's sort of been taken away from them. And almost always I'll say, I don't think you probably sat in med school thinking you'd see someone like me. And they're like, no, I have no idea what happened and how things got so out of hand that I'm having to see you. And I said, that's what I'm interested in. Help me sort of take me through your story. And so I took all these stories and found these sort of common themes and pitfalls where people's, sort of went, they were on one trajectory and sort of went in a different direction.
Wow.
And I took that and created a curriculum for medical students around wellness, professional development. And, it's pretty hard to get, students and residents to care about anything that's not on step one or the tests. And so that's why I would be pretty honest with that. I was like, this is probably not going to be on your test. But what I can tell you is that these are real stories, and it's okay to make mistakes in life. That's going to happen. But life is pretty long if you make every single mistake yourself rather than learn from other people's stories. And so there's an opportunity to learn from some stories and say, these are real people that whose lives sort of got turned around, and what can we learn? So from a preventative work, that led to some additional work in the residencies. And the residency sort of caught wind of what I did, and they said, "Hey, we'd like to take this and do some sort of work here with the residents and fellows." And then at that point, what I realized, the hidden curriculum is so strong, right? It doesn't matter what I say to the med students or the residents if their attendings are doing something totally different. The environment in which we work isn't conducive to these things that I'm teaching, then I'm going to lose. And so I had a chance to join the healthcare system and do this work in terms of really reimagining how we actually practice medicine in these environments that don't always promote our ability to be well. Basically, the saying I say, my dad was a coal miner, is I'm here to fix coal mines, not make stronger canaries.
Right.
So I'm really interested in sort of how do you design work in a way that's health promoting, and so that was very hopefully useful. And then the pandemic happened and I became very useful. And so it's better to be lucky than good, and timing matters a great deal in life. And so it was the timing where this stuff, as you said earlier, really was clear why this was going to matter. And that's led to a lot of interesting opportunities.
And what do you think what are some of the key things that you think that we can control or that we can change?
In terms of the design of healthcare systems? Yeah,
I think whatever you think is contributing to the resiliency, I don't even know if I love that word, but the better environment for our healthcare providers, physicians and otherwise.
Yeah, so our approach is based on this concept called work determinants of well-being. And so a lot of people know what social determinants of health are. So, we know that purely going to your doctor is not going to lead to health. You have to have a safe place to live. You have to have healthy food. You have to have safety around you. And all these things go into whether people are healthy or not. It's not just purely going to your doctor that's going to allow for someone to be healthy. In the same way, there are work determinants of well-being, which are these factors about how we design work that promote health or the opposite. Things like rest and recovery, a sense of belonging, flexibility in your job, autonomy in your job. Do you have the supplies you need when you need them to be able to deliver the kind of care we all sort of want to do? We all want to give to our patients. And when we can't do those things, I think all of those things are what are burnoutogenic. And so our job is to identify those work determinants of well-being and modify them so that we're trying to create an optimal workplace. Again, that doesn't guarantee people will be well or happy or they'll love this particular job. I don't view that as our role, but I do think organizations owe it to their workers to be able to say, hey, you know what, are we providing you the opportunity to be well? The classic example we give is there's all these people that give these resilience talks on how important sleep is. Well, that's great. But if I'm on call Q2, then when would you like for me to sleep? You tell me it's important, but you haven't designed my job in a way that's going to allow me to actually do that in a healthy way. And that's where I think we can work to create healthy coal mines, if you will.
Yeah, it's always bothered me when, I was a behaviorist and family medicine program for 2 different programs for almost a decade or over a decade. And they always wanted me to give sleep hygiene lectures. And I think that's so insulting. I just don't, what are we supposed to say? Get a new career? I don't know.
Sure.
And so a resident, sleep hygiene residency, you have talk about autonomy, as you mentioned, you have no control over your schedule, when you're going to be evaluated, what you're going to be asked to do when you're on a new rotation, what rotations you get. So it's very difficult. And I think designing the actual holding space for people in a different way is just so important.
Yeah. And just being honest about this concept of sustainability, right? Is like, we are still human. We may be able to do certain things, but to expect us to be able to do things that humans can't do generally isn't sustainable. We can do anything for sprints, right? We did it in the pandemic. We did a lot of stuff that you can do for short bursts if absolutely needed when there's surges, et cetera. But to try to run sprint speed at the marathon of a career is a recipe for injury in our view.
Right. And one of the things that stands out to me about your story that I think is important for a listener to tune into is that if you look back on where you are right now, it probably looks like a pretty straight line. Like, yeah, of course, that led into this opportunity and that led into this opportunity. And you make it sound easy, but you were just following your heart. You were following your interests and your passions and the next step of what seemed worthwhile for you. And then and I just want to encourage listeners to hear that and to know that you're in a really amazing position now and you have a lot of leadership and impact, but that came from little steps all along the way.
And I might add, it's what I think is most challenging is to view each of those things that you have an opportunity to do with the same passion, right? And bringing that same level of excellence because someone's watching. Right? They're giving you a role that might be small to see how you handle that. Mm-hmm. And so you should either not take it if you're not going to bring excellence to that role, or if you're going to take it, then recognize that you're going to learn something new. Right? Every little thing I've done has taught me something, whether it's just simply how to return emails professionally, or how to schedule a meeting and run a meeting that is useful. Is such a big skill in my life now. And you don't just wake up and learn how to run a good meeting. It takes practice. It takes failure and doing it wrong, watching other people. I used to be a part of these little groups and, most of them weren't meaningful. You wouldn't see them on my CV right now, but they were meaningful in my skill development of leadership. Mm-hmm. So each one of those things you sort of want to sort of bring yourself to and recognize each opportunity to lead. It's all the same. It doesn't matter if it's CEO or leading a tiny little work group. The concept of leading is the same in all those settings. And so it's all practice.
Yeah, I think it's so, some of the things that you're doing didn't really exist when you were in school. And so I have my doctorate in health psychology. I was studying health psychology and I worked with cancer patients, spinal cord injury, all these different things. There wasn't a chapter, a section, a page, a section at all on physician well-being. And yet through my work as a mental health professional working at the side of physicians, I kept seeing that we were supposed to train physicians to respond in these compassionate and mindful ways. But how are you supposed to do that if you're not taking care of yourself or if the environment doesn't care for you? So I started giving little pieces of my lectures over to self-care. Like, okay, here's a lecture on difficult conversations. And now here's the last 15 minutes of the lecture to say how you can take care of yourself so that you can calmly sit through a difficult conversation, right? And then that built and people saw that I was passionate about this. And then I was asked to create a director of well-being position for myself in a really large healthcare organization. So it all looks pretty fluid, but it was all just me following my heart. And I think you were the same. It's just, I really want listeners to take that away and hear that you just take the next best step. And to your point, do a great job at it. And people will see that work.
And timing matters. There'll be an idea that's just as good this year, just as good as when you had it. And you're like, why didn't people listen to me 5 years ago? It's just the way it is. Like, it doesn't mean your idea is not good, but you do have to understand that timing matters. And so, you may have to wait for certain things to be the right timing, but keep coming up with those ideas, keep working on fleshing out those ideas. Because you want to be ready to strike when the iron's hot. If it's hot and you haven't even thought of anything, it's unlikely you're going to be able to really strike when that moment comes. But
Right.
if you've prepared yourself, then when the moment's there, you'll be able to actually take advantage.
And when you believe in something, just keep working on it, and you'll be ready, right? Is what you're saying.
Yep.
So you probably started out with certain ideas in your head about what physician wellness should look like, or what that even meant, and has that changed over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, my initial foray was, I've been burnt out many times, and so part of this is always, if I can't figure this out, this is not going to be a very long career. And so part of it, the fire was there, and I have a lot of friends and family that went to med school. Again, like I told you, my parents viewed this as the greatest job on earth. They were not physicians and thought this was a certain thing they frankly didn't know. And what I saw was that's pretty true for a lot of my friends and family, and a lot of them, did the whole thing, med school, residency, and couple of years in practice, then they stopped seeing patients or non-clinical. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I had a sense that, or I have a sense that they were great doctors, and they probably would have loved to continue to do some clinical work if the conditions were set in a way that were more sustainable. And so all those things were individually focused. Right? What can I do for this individual to improve their wellness? I think what's probably changed is my brain works in systems. And so what I realized was I can do this work at the individual level, or I can try to fix coal mines. And given the way my brain works and the things I'm passionate about, I felt like I could add value in a multiplier way if I could actually figure out how to improve the system. And so that focus from the individual to the system has been something that has probably evolved over time.
So you have been involved and consult with a lot of national research groups, or you have with some research groups on wellness. Can you share a bit about that work?
Sure. So I work with a group called the Second Trial, and this was a group that studies surgical residency well-being across the country. And so they were doing this work at Northwestern, and our paths crossed, and they asked me to help be a part of their team, and say, bring that psychiatry perspective, bring that physician wellness expertise to the team. And that's been really fun, especially because I'm not a surgeon. And so it's really fun to have a chance to see how other people view residency. I wouldn't say that the same people that go into surgery are the same people that go into psychiatry,
right,
in general. And so you see what those differences in culture do, and how you should think about them. Again, if I were to say, hey, I don't think surgery is doing it right because your residency doesn't look like psychiatry residency, I actually think that wouldn't resonate at all. They're not afraid of the work. They sort of know what they're getting themselves into. They love it in a way that's pretty amazing to me. And they're hardcore about it, a lot of them, and I sort of enjoy learning from them. And hopefully I have had an opportunity to share some of my thinking around, how can you keep that dedication that you all have and still design workplaces that are sustainable and healthy.
Yeah. You've done some of your own writing as well and research. Do you have any work that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, this idea of work determinants of well-being is something I'm really hopeful will continue to sort of take the well-being movement in a new direction. I do think one of the limitations of well-being right now is often measured subjectively. And I'm not totally sure that is, it's necessary, but not sufficient, as they say. I think it's always important to know what the voice of the people feels. But if we want to get to what are those design elements that matter for work, then we have to sort of move from subjective to objective. We have to move to those design elements that we've talked about. For instance, one of the things we're working on right now is just simply looking at paid time off and breaks and rest and recovery. What does that look like? How does one know what's healthy. I see people that have, let's say, the same 4 weeks off per year. Some people take those weeks all off at around now, right? They between the end of the year, they take 2 or 3 weeks off, and that works for them. There's other people that say, hey, you know what? I sort of know myself, and I've got to take a week off every 3 months, quarterly, just to kind of make it through. Well, there's a way to research that and actually say, is there an optimal way for most people? Obviously, everyone's got their own unique things that they may have to do. If, for instance, my family wanted to go to India, it's hard to go to India for a week. And so you might have to take 2 weeks off in a row.
Yeah.
So there's going to be variations, but I do think there's learnings here about what would be the optimal way to do this from a sustainability perspective. And so the work we're doing around that, I'm really excited about, and hopefully we'll add to our understanding of what it takes to make healthy coal mines.
Well, we'll be looking forward to hearing more about that as it comes to light. You're involved in a lot of different professional organizations as well, some of them local and some of them national. Do you have some favorite organizations that really help fill your cup?
Yeah, I guess I'll step back and just say why I do that, because it's extra work. Most every one of these things will have a retreat or some getaway. So I'm away from my family for 2 to 3 days to attend the retreat or conference. And so I have a young child. And so some of that stuff changed, frankly. I didn't like traveling as much. I didn't want to go to some of these conferences or in-person meetings. And again, the pandemic was helpful in that way. Some of the stuff moved virtually. And so I was able to participate in some things that I might have actually, sort of said, you know what, I'm going to put a pause on this until he's older. And I'm okay with, getting involved. But I do think that, for me, it's been a source of support, right? Nobody else has my title at my job. And so there's no one else for me to talk to at my organization to say, hey, you know what are you working on? How do you navigate these situations? And so building that network of support is really critical. And having places where you're generating new ideas, new things that you can then bring to your organization has been super helpful for me, and really helped me feel like, hey, I feel like I'm adding value for my organization, partly by bringing the best of ideas from everywhere around the country, and frankly, even internationally. And that's sort of why I do this work, did this work initially. More now, it's been about, hey, I think we're doing something interesting and novel. And if I believe in healthcare worker well-being, not just Northwestern worker well-being, then if I can share these ideas with other people, hopefully we can create healthier coal mines at other places, and that other healthcare workers can sort of gain from our experiences and hopefully some of our wins that we've had over the last couple of years. So that is a big part of what motivates me to be able to spread the science and spread the knowledge that we gain as well.
So in addition to all of this, because you just needed more hobbies, you are also a certified leadership, organizational, and well-being coach. So what made you feel like you needed that extra step or motivated you to take that extra step?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, so in that work that I do clinically, we would refer to coaches sometimes when physicians were what they call being disruptive or abrasive or having professionalism concerns. We would send one of the recommendations at the end of our evaluations would be to get a coach. And I couldn't understand who these people were we were referring to. And they seemed to charge a lot. And I couldn't tell what was happening because a lot of times it didn't feel like it worked for very long. People would sort of behave for a little while and then things would go downhill again. And I was like, is this a bunch of people that are doing therapy but not calling themselves therapists, or having to go to school to actually become therapists and just sort of doing pseudo therapy? And so the truth is I went to go get my certificate to sort of yell at somebody about what coaching is and shouldn't be.
Okay.
and sort of understand what it is, who are these people that I'm referring to. And while I was there, I think there is some of that. I do think there's some people playing therapists when they probably shouldn't be. Yeah. But I think that if it's done correctly, it is its own lane, or can have enough of its own lane that's different than therapy, and can be quite useful, especially in my view, not necessarily in these sort of remediation situations, but in these folks that really want to achieve the highest performance.
Right.
And so if you look at other industries, the people getting coaching are not the people that are not doing well. It's the stars. It's the people that have the highest potential in the organization are given these coaches to take someone who's already great and making them that 10% greater, because that 10% greater, those are the people that can change the trajectory of your organization, or frankly, an entire industry. And that appeals to someone who is idol as Michael Jordan. So I'm sort of interested in people that really excel at their craft, and what does it take to do that? And I think coaching is a big part of what it takes to really achieve your full potential.
Yeah, so I agree. It's coaching is something that was really not on the radar very much, and maybe a decade ago. And now all the big organizations hire professional coaches. And I do think that coaching is probably best for people who want to up their game, rather than the people who maybe are really, really struggling, because there's so much underneath it. And as a psychologist who does some coaching for physicians and medical professionals, particularly women, it's really hard not to touch you have to really respect that line. And it's hard not to go into the pathologies or the past traumas or the dysfunctional thinking that are feeding some of that professionalism issues and things like that. So definitely there is a difference. I would love the listeners to take that away, is that there is a difference between therapy and coaching. So you have a lot of things going on. So how do you set boundaries at work and take care of your own self?
Yeah, I think for me, it's, I feel like I am deeply passionate about a few things, including my circle of control. So those who know me know that I'm sort of a broken record, but a lot of what you do in leadership, as you know, is that there are things that I can influence, there's things I control, and there's things outside my circle of control. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if you want to fix the world, it can be sort of overwhelming, and it can be disappointing because it doesn't happen overnight. And when I've worked with wellness leaders that are sort of struggling, it's because I get the sense that they've sort of want to fix it all at one time. And I respect that, but I find that to be unsustainable for me. Is for me, I pick a few goals, a few things that I think I can move the needle on, that are in my circle of control, or I have a lot of influence on. And I make sure, and I'm very clear about what are those things going to look like if I do what I want to be able to do this year. And, I check in and say, hey, are we making progress on this? And is the coal mine a little bit healthier this year than it was last year? And if I can feel that I'm making a difference, my team's making a difference, then I'm good, actually. Even if it's not perfect, it doesn't really bother me that much. But if it's better today than when I found it, that's sort of my model, is am I going to leave something better than I found it? And I'm not going to say that when I leave it's going to be perfect, but is it better than when I found it? And that's a huge part of it to me. I'm also a big believer in job crafting. And so you said something earlier that it's very true. And it's probably hardest at the resident level, where you don't have that much autonomy or control. But what I have found is it doesn't take complete autonomy to still have autonomy, or at least have one has a sense that they have some say in their life. Mm-hmm. And when you feel that way, even that little bit, am I crafting the parts that I can't control? So for instance, actually how I got into this work was I had one elective rotation in my third year, and that's the only thing I could really control, right? Everything else, they tell you what rotation you have to be. I had this one thing, and I wanted to work at a physician treatment center, and we didn't have that. And so I found a place that was treating physicians who'd become impaired, and I asked my program director, can I do an away? And she was like, sure, you can go do it away. And I tell you, obviously that was the trigger to everything else you've heard, but that's not really my point. My point was, even then, I was sort of burnt out then. And to feel like, hey, I could do something fun, creative, pick something I wanted to do and learn about, that even then, that was very rejuvenating. One little thing that I could control and craft about my experience mattered deeply to me. And I think that is true for most people, is they have something in their lives that you can sort of craft and add to. I know that you've sort of said a lot of titles today, but the truth is, I had a lot more. And this concept of pruning is very important. I do think there are people that are collectors, that if you look at their email signature, they've got 14 things under it, and that's not going well. There's no way they can do all those roles well. And so after a few years, I tend to get rid of things a lot, whereas I don't try to collect a lot of roles, because every role, if you're doing it well, has an associated number of meetings, emails, and cognitive space that it takes up. And so for me, I got to get rid of some of that stuff so that I have enough space to do the things I'm doing well.
I think that's one of the things you said is really stuck out to me, is that away rotation, the elective away rotation, because it's a lot of work. It usually involves a lot of extra paperwork and bureaucracy, and you got to get this person sign off and that. And there's a lot of phone calls and emails and paperwork, but it is worth it. Most of the residents I know who took that time to craft, to use your word, their away rotation. Some of them were hiking through, the mountains of India, midwifing, and, others went abroad to different other countries, or they worked at a procedure specialty or sports medicine that we didn't offer at our institution. They all really found that to be so formative in their ability to shape who they were as a professional, and they took control of who they were going to be, rather than being a victim of what happened to be offered in their selected residency. So I think that's so important. What do you think is the best thing about your work?
I mean, for me personally, it's I feel like I'm using the gifts that I was given to serve other people. Like that's for me what I enjoy the most, and I think I get the most out of it personally. In terms of what has been the most fun, is that when we started this job, it was there was nobody else. It was just me and one other person hanging out. And now, because of the good work, that good work begets good work, and good work begets more resources. And that's allowed me to be able to provide funded time for so many colleagues that are also getting to scratch their itch and their passion for wellness in a way that's not just in their volunteer time or after hours. This is a part of their career. This is something they have time to actually devote to, so that they can serve people and they can scratch their itches and they can use their innate talents to serve other people. And that's what I truly get a kick out of. It's still the same thing that I told you about why I like teaching, is being able to have the next generation take those things and do what they're supposed to do with them. And here I feel like, the people that we are building this dedicated group of people that are looking out for the well-being of all sorts of healthcare workers, not just physicians. The small role that I can play in helping them be able to do that is really validating and really fulfilling for me.
So what are some of the challenges?
I think the challenges are what we said earlier, is that it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen quickly. There will be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back, where you're like, something happened where it felt like that wiped out everything we did. And it's not like that, but in the moment it feels like that. It's like, all the good things we did, we just wiped it away because of X, Y, and Z thing that happened. And, you have to be very intentional, again, about what's your definition of success. How are you going to know you're making a difference? Because, again, especially if we're just using subjective markers like burnout, you're at the whims of other people's feelings. Then that's a pretty vulnerable place to be. Whereas for me, that's partly why I'm interested in design, is whether people like it immediately or not, the design is better. And that's where I can stay focused in on, hey, are things getting better or not in the long run? So it takes a long run mentality in a short-term world. And that sometimes is pretty difficult to navigate as a leader. Is yes, everyone says they're about the long term, but the truth is it's pretty hard. You got to survive the short term to see the long term in whatever you're doing.
Many little battles along the way, right?
That's right.
So, okay, I have some closing rapid fire questions for you that we ask everybody as they come on the show. What is one piece of advice you would give to an early career physician?
I would say, and this is going to sound maybe wrong I would say yes to a lot of stuff. At an early career, I said yes to lots of stuff. And yes, that has a cost. I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't have a cost, but I wasn't sure where this career was going to funnel. Now you can see it's very funneled and very specific what I do, but that's not how it started. With the caveat, only say yes if you can do a good job. If you know you don't have the bandwidth, I would much rather you say no than say yes to something and do a bad job, because your brand has to be that if you said yes to something, you're reliable, that I can trust you to do good work. And so we all have limitations. And so it's fine to say no if you know you can't do a good job. But if you think you can do a good job, I would encourage you to take the chance, as long as you then continue to evaluate for pruning, right? This is not something you said yes to and now you're doing it 15 years later. You did it, you did a good job, and you may or may not want to continue on in that. So make sure you're pruning as well.
Okay. And what's one piece of advice you would have given to your younger self?
I think I would say, I would probably say, make sure that you recognize how small the world is. I think, those the organizations you mentioned earlier, like, it's a very small world. I mean, I see the same people at every conference now pretty quickly. And so, again, it's how you carry yourself, and hopefully it's who you are, but making sure that you recognize that there's very few things worth burning any bridges for, almost nothing. And so, you continue to, it's okay to say no. It's okay to disagree, but make sure you recognize that, again, it is a very long game in a very small world.
And what are you loving right now about medicine?
I feel like there's a tension between the word you said earlier, where there is a sense of victimness, like, that was sort of pervasive. And frankly still is a little bit, but I also think there is enough right now where people are saying, hey, I have agency. I'm an incredibly talented, trained individual with a very particular set of skills that allows me to be able to have a say in how I want to practice, and have a say in what I think is right for the patient, and what is doable for any human being in a sustainable way. And I think that sense of empowerment will help us be a part of the solution, rather than sort of victims or sort of just passive recipients of this thing. I think there is this sense of hey, how can I learn to lead and be an active part and a constructive part of designing the future awesome healthcare delivery system, or healthier coal mine, as I like to say.
Sure. And what's next for you?
I would say that, certainly I am really interested in spreading the knowledge we've gained, but also really interested in the role technology, I think, is going to play in well-being, whether it's AI or other other strategies out there that can really begin to take a fresh look at things that we've said, hey, this is never going to change. People, even 10 years ago, like, notes are going to be the bane of medicine's existence forever. I'm not so sure about that anymore. It wouldn't surprise me if 5 years from now, none of us write notes.
And that'd be great.
Totally different, right? That's totally different. Whether it's going to happen or not, I don't know, but at least the possibility is exciting to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dr. D, if people want to learn more about you or read more about you, how can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I don't do much social media because I study happiness, and I don't very much believe that a lot of these things are conducive to my happiness. But I am on LinkedIn, and so people can feel free to reach me through that.
You're not the first guest to mention that they keep away from social media for their own health. So good to know. So I just want to recap a few things that you said. You said teaching can make you immortal, and I think that's really cool in a metaphorical way. Do work that matters and do it well, and be ready. Be ready for when the world is ready for your work. I love your concept of work determinants of well-being. I think that's really intriguing, and give your energy to your circle of control. So thank you so much for those words of wisdom and for joining us for this chat. We hope this show has you thinking about your own career and what action you can take to make it ideal for you right from the start. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and tell others to join us. We greatly appreciate your reviews and comments, which help us grow to a wider audience. If you want to stay in touch, email me at practiceonpurpose.com. Let me know what topics you want us to explore in future episodes. And remember, build your practice on purpose to stay connected to your purpose. I appreciate you joining us on this journey, and let's keep exploring together. Until next episode.